All right, let's dive into one of history's most chaotic, most important, and frankly, most insane events. The year is 1789, and France, on the surface, looks like it's on top of the world. It's a global superpower, the cultural heart of Europe, and it just helped America win its independence. But underneath all that glitters at the Palace of Versailles, France is a ticking time bomb of debt, bad harvests, and some seriously deep inequality.
So that brings us to the big question, right? How in the world does a kingdom, one of the oldest in Europe, go from an all-powerful king to being defined by the guillotine in less than a decade? I mean, that is one heck of a transformation. It's explosive, it's violent, and it completely changed the world.
To really get what happened, you've got to understand the powder keg before it blew. Pre-revolutionary France was a land of wild contradictions. You had the brilliant philosophers of the Enlightenment right alongside mass starvation. You had these glittering palaces and a social structure that was just completely fundamentally broken. And sitting at the very, very top of this whole system was the king, an absolute monarch. His power was said to come directly from God. This idea was perfectly summed up by Louis XVI's famous ancestor, Louis XIV. The king's word was law. Simple as that. He had all the power. He was the judge, jury, and, well, the lawmaker. He could lock up anyone for any reason, a power that people were understandably not super fond of. Okay, this slide right here, this tells you pretty much everything you need to know. French society was rigidly split into three groups, or estates. First, you've got the clergy. Second, the nobility. Together, they're maybe 2% of the population, but they own about a third of all the land. And then you have the third estate, which is literally everyone else, from doctors and lawyers to peasants and city workers. Now look at that bottom row. See it? Who paid the taxes? Yep, the 98% paid all of them. All of them. And this created a total disconnect. While King Louis XVI was, famously more interested in his hobbies, like locksmithing and hunting, his people were genuinely starving. A series of bad harvests made bread prices go through the roof. I mean, people were so desperate they were eating bread that was literally cut with sawdust to make it cheaper. All while the Third Estate was being absolutely crushed by things like the gabelle, a hated tax on salt. And the king was living in the unbelievable luxury of Versailles.
And nothing captures this cluelessness better than the famous story about Queen Marie Antoinette. When she was told the people had no bread to eat, she supposedly said, "Let them eat brioche." Now, brioche isn't exactly cake. It's more like a fancy, rich bread made with eggs and butter. But honestly, whether she actually said it or not almost doesn't matter. The story spread like wildfire because it just felt true. It confirmed what everyone already suspected. The royals were living in a completely different universe.
So, by 1789, the government was officially bankrupt. Decades of expensive wars, especially helping out the American Revolution, had drained the treasury. The king's advisors knew they had to tax the nobles and the clergy, but those groups flat out refused. So with no other choice, the king did something that hadn't been done in 175 years. He called a meeting.
And this is where everything just explodes. In May, the big meeting, the Estates General, finally happens. But the Third Estate quickly figures out they're going to get outvoted every time. So in June, they show up and find themselves locked out. What do? They just walk over to a nearby tennis court and swear an oath not to quit until they've written a constitution for France. They basically declare themselves the new government, the National Assembly. Then, on July 14th, rumors start flying that the king is sending in the army. So the people of Paris, terrified and angry, stormed the Bastille prison, looking for gunpowder and taking down a huge symbol of the king's power.
So, while Paris is literally erupting in a rebellion that will change history forever, what does King Louis XVI write in his personal diary for that day? Nothing. Went hunting. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. It's the perfect snapshot of just how completely and utterly out of touch he was. For him, the day was a total bust. For France, it was the beginning of everything. With the Bastille in the hands of the people, the revolution enters its first phase. And it's a surprisingly idealistic one. This new National Assembly, with the power of the streets behind it, gets right to work. They start tearing down the old world, piece by piece, trying to build a new one based on reason, logic, and human rights.
And the changes came so fast. In one single, dramatic, all-night session on August 4th, nobles, basically terrified for their lives, stood up one by one and gave up their ancient feudal privileges. Soon after, the whole system of feudalism was officially gone. Then the assembly passed this incredible new document, the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. They even seized all of the church's land to help pay off the national debt. So here's the really big deal about the Declaration of the Rights of Man. It completely flipped the whole idea of power on its head. It said that rights aren't something the king gives you, they're something you're born with. And it said that power comes from the nation, from the people, not from a king chosen by God. This was a radical idea, a bombshell that would echo all around the globe. And here's a great little fun fact that shows just how much this period still affects us. Inside that new assembly hall, different political groups naturally sat together. The more radical guys, the ones who wanted to get rid of the king entirely, all sat on the left side of the room. The conservatives, who still supported a monarchy, sat on the right. And just like that, our modern political terms, left wing and right wing, were born. But that early spirit of unity and hope, well, it didn't last. The revolution started to feel threatened. It was at war with other countries, and it was paranoid about enemies from within. It grew more radical, more suspicious, and a whole lot bloodier. The fight for liberty was about to take a seriously dark turn. You can really see it happen step by step. First, in 1791, the royal family tries to escape France in disguise, but they get caught. Any trust that was left is just shattered. Then, other European kings in Austria and Prussia get terrified that these revolutionary ideas are going to spread, so they declare war on France. This threat from outside makes everyone inside even more radical, which leads to them abolishing the monarchy completely in 1792. And by January of the next year, the man they once called King Louis was now Citizen Louis Capet, and he was put on trial and executed for treason. His execution was carried out with a brand new invention, the guillotine. And here's the grim irony. It was actually promoted as a more humane, more enlightened way to die. The idea was that it was quick, supposedly painless, and democratic. The same blade fell for a king as it did for a common criminal. It would very quickly become the symbol of the revolution's most terrifying chapter. 40,000, that's the estimated number of people who were executed during what we now call the Reign of Terror. Under the leadership of a guy named Maximilien Robespierre and his Committee of Public Safety, which sounds like something out of a dystopian novel, a wave of paranoia just washed over France. If you were even suspected of being an enemy of the revolution, well, that could be enough to send you to the guillotine. And these radicals, the Jacobins, didn't just want a new government. They wanted a whole new reality. They were trying to erase every single trace of the old France. They literally turned churches into temples of reason. They even invented a completely new calendar with new month names and 10-day weeks, all to scrub away the influence of Christianity and the monarchy from the very idea of time itself. But here's the thing about a revolution that runs on fear and terror. It can't last. Eventually, the constant bloodshed was just too much, even for the revolutionaries themselves. And all of that chaos created a power vacuum, paving the way for a totally new kind of leader to emerge. And in a perfect, if brutal, twist of fate, the Reign of Terror ended when Robespierre himself was arrested and sent to the guillotine. The revolution literally devoured its own leader. After that, people were just exhausted. A new, much more conservative government called the Directory took over, but it was weak, it was corrupt, and France was a mess. And that power vacuum was the perfect opening for a brilliant, incredibly ambitious young general named Napoleon Bonaparte. See, he was a product of the revolution. Before, a guy from a minor noble family like him could never have risen so high. But now, with the old rules gone, his talent on the battlefield made him a hero. He returned to Paris, saw his chance, and seized power, bringing the decade of revolution to a definitive end. So after all that chaos and bloodshed, what did it all mean? Why does it still matter so much? Well, the French Revolution changed everything. It gave us the modern idea of a nation-state, a country of citizens with rights, not just subjects of a king. It spread those powerful ideas of liberty and the people's right to rule all over the world. As we saw, it even created our political vocabulary of left versus right. And, fascinatingly, the sheer horror of its chaos also inspired the birth of modern conservative thinking. And that leaves us with one final haunting question. The revolution started with some of the most noble ideals you can imagine: liberty, equality, the rights of all people. But it descended into a bloodbath where those very same rights were crushed in the name of the cause. So it really forces us to ask, where is that line? When does a righteous fight for freedom become its own worst enemy?